I'm Mara Webster with Welcome to the Stage, and today I'm so thrilled to welcome to the stage the wonderful executive producers and co-showrunners of Abbott Elementary, Justin Halpern and Patrick Schumacker. And starting off, I wanted to talk about the way in which Abbott Elementary is always a comedy which leads character first. It's not necessarily a show where the stakes have to be really huge and grandiose around. It's more these internal developments, relationship developments between characters. And so as you're in the writing room season by season, how does that always shape the way that you're approaching narratives and storylines?
Yeah, I mean, I first thought is like if you care about the characters, then you'll care about what they care about. Um, and I think we've always operated kind of character first. I feel like when you go the other way, where it's like the world's going to be destroyed, and now let's try to make you care about it by figuring out characters that can fit in there. It doesn't work as well. So we in the writers' room, we always kind of just start off with like what do these characters want this year? How are they evolving and growing? How is it different than years before? What do we want to say? And kind of move from there.
I love that because also any friction that exists in the show, it's not necessarily about needing characters to be arguing and falling out with each other. It's they can rub up against one another, but it doesn't need to turn into explosive arguments. So how do you find where you want that energy to sit between characters or the external circumstances that you really want to be pressing in on them?
Well, I mean, so several seasons we have kind of started, even before we've delved into the individual character arcs, we did say, okay, what sort of facet of the public school system are we going to explore this season? We had, charter schools, we had the gentrification of a neighborhood, we had like the district versus the teachers. This year we're gonna explore some new things. I won't spoil anything, but then once we have that, we get into literally like the individual character arcs where we will just write down all of seven of our series regulars across a couple of whiteboards and then just start going down the column. Like, what happened last year? Let's like reorient ourselves and, what are they going to be dealing with this year? And I mean, so much of, what those 22 episodes of every season turn out to be are really kind of primarily shaped within the first couple of weeks of the writers' room when we take that time to just focus specifically on those character arcs. And then yeah, you can play like within those lines, within those parameters, and you're constantly discovering stuff as you go. And it is broadcast television or just television in general. Things tend to change here and there kind of as you go. I would say, we were really like locked in early seasons and didn't really deviate much. We kind of had like a very, very clear ending in sight for every season, for pretty much all of our characters. And then in the last couple of seasons, I think like we sort of, we started like coloring outside of the lines a little bit with the ending, like the moment. This was season 4 with Ava getting fired. That actually was kind of a late development. So, like as we become more comfortable with the characters, I think that does end up like allowing you a little bit more latitude, just because, you do have that comfort and things become a little bit more second nature and you have more, I think, confidence to like, play. Yeah, but it's a little bit of both having a roadmap and then, yeah, just being able to kind of play within that.
I love that description, though, of taking every single character and kind of writing out their arc and looking at them alongside each other. Because for all of the characters in this show, you want them to grow and develop and learn more introspect about themselves, but you never want to take them too far away from what you've already created and shaped in them. And so when you're going through that process, how do you find the parameters of how far along a self-discovery journey can each character go within these 23 episodes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we try to play it as like realistically as possible. I mean, it's a TV show, but we try to make their growth as human beings feel somewhat realistic, which is to say that we as human beings don't generally tend to grow very fast in terms of our or at all. So I think we try to stay pretty true to like what have we earned? What would it look like for this person? Where would they go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the nice thing too, just in terms of like figuring out stories and tensions between the characters, is that we have 7 series regulars who are all home run hitters, and every single writer on staff like will be eager to write for like any character. Sometimes you work on a show, oftentimes I think you work on a show where like there are certain combinations maybe, or certain characters that maybe don't feel as fleshed out, or just might not end up being as interesting to watch. And you can kind of like plug and play any of our casts, like either like twosomes, threesomes, that sort of thing, and you kind of always can immediately find the fun in those combinations. And like a huge part of that was like the way that from the get-go, I think Quinta had really clear ideas of who these characters were like even in just kind of our archetypes from the very very beginning, and some are based on real people as well. But then also when we got this cast in place, they're such home run hitters. And yeah, it's everybody's like anybody's fine to write like any character. Nobody ever like pushes back and like, hey, why don't you like handle this combination, or this character? It's just kind of like, I think, a little second nature at this point, at least to like generate like first thought ideas. Those come pretty quickly.
Yeah. I also love how whenever you introduce someone new into the show or a new circumstance, you can really look at it as, okay, what do we want to discover about this character, or what do we want them to realize about themselves? So Luke Tenney coming into the show as Dominic is a great example of this, because he is Janine in season 1, and she's able to really look at the goalpost of how far she's come. But also Barbara's changed too, because Janine expects Barbara to be the same to him, but she's not, because she's also gone on her own journey. And so how do you always look at kind of what the outer effect of that is going to be whenever you make those decisions to bring someone in?
That's a incredibly astute observation, because that's exactly why we did why I want to bring him in, was like, this is going to be a sort of barometer for Janine, and also I think just a reminder to our audience of like how difficult it is to do this job, and how hard it is to do it while you have no sort of support system within the institution to do it as well. So that was really, I mean, something that was fun. Also, we just love performers too that like operate on a different wavelength than our cast, but still fit within the tone of the show. Um, I think that's a big one. It's like if you look at like Tariq on the show, like obviously Zach Fox, who's an incredible performer. He is bringing something that no one else in the show is bringing. It's from a different viewpoint, but it still kind of like exists within a believable ecosystem of Abbott. So I think that's also what we're looking for when we're trying to find performers to come in to play with our cast.
You also get the opportunity several seasons in now to kind of have these flagship moments season by season. So whenever we go back to Ava Fest, it feels very familiar to the audience, but there's always something new. And there's always some sort of Halloween or dressing up where we get to go, okay, what are Ginny and Gregory going to be this time? Okay, now they're Ryan Coogler in an IMAX cinema, which relates to the Jurassic Park costume. And there's such great ways of giving character exposition. So when you look at the breakdown of episodes, how do you find those moments where you want to have that familiarity and that callback for the audience?
I wish I could say it was as thoughtful as what you're describing. I think sometimes we stumble into it. Sometimes it's something we have thought about from the very beginning that we know we want to hit. Sometimes it'll simply be just an idea that was in the room, and we'll see a chance to do what you're talking about. But I think part of the way that, and one of the reasons we like working with Quinta is like Quinta comes into every season with like a general idea of what she wants to do just in terms of character arcs. And it's more than enough to go off on, but it's not so detailed that it binds us to not having happy accidents. I mean, one of my favorite things that happened in the show was when the season 4, when they're taking the golf course money, and then Ava gets fired. And that we didn't know what the end of the season was going to be. We didn't know Ava was going to get fired. And it was probably like episode 12 or 13 where we're all sitting there with Quinta, and that idea kind of comes forth of like, well, maybe she should face consequences. And maybe that's a great opportunity to have that character understand what it is she loves about working in a school, because that's something we haven't really gotten a chance to see yet for her. And so I love sort of having happy accidents like that happen.
Yeah. I mean, I also think what you're talking about speaks to the gift of having 23 episodes in a season, because you also don't have to resolve anything by the end of an episode. So when Ava got fired, it wasn't the next episode that she was back. Like, audiences genuinely didn't know if Janelle James was staying with the show at that point because of how it was played. You know, Janine and Gregory breaking up didn't have to be resolved immediately. And so how does that impact a lot of the pacing that you're able to put into these stories?
Yeah, I mean, you're also looking at it from the perspective of, I think a modern television audience is so savvy. We now have, we've had for a very long time, IMDb, we've had, all of these resources at our, a click away that would sort of, if you have a question about whether or not a character is like leaving a show, potentially you kind of get your quick answer if you want to. So I think like with certain things, we're careful about like, well, is this falling at like the end of the season where it's like maybe plausible that this character could be leaving? And so you have to be, sort of thoughtful about that as well. And just kind of, it's hard. It's limiting, but I think, the necessity ends up, kind of breeding creativity and all of that. And so, yeah, like just to echo what Justin was saying as well, where oftentimes it is just stuff that lately, I think now that we have like this real grasp of who these characters are, it's just sort of born from a little bit of like improvisation amongst the writers. um and that spans more than just like the 22 episodes as well. I think there's some big stuff coming up in season 6. Like we have our 100th episode coming up, and there's it's a momentous episode, and that's all I'll say. But like there is something that happens in that episode that is, its roots are from the born in like the very first episode of the show. They're born in the pilot of the show, and like so it works in a vacuum. If you haven't seen the pilot, it's still going to work for the story, but it's going to reward people who have been with the show since the very, very beginning, I think, in a major way. So yeah, this it's crazy. Like the process has kind of been the same throughout these 6 seasons, but it's also kind of adapted to as well. We've done so many of these. This is actually the first time that Justin and I have worked on a show that's gonna make it to 100 episodes and beyond. So it's pretty wild. We're still learning some things.
I mean, can I just say congratulations on making it to 100 episodes, because I feel like it's also not something that happens that frequently for any show at television either.
No, hopefully we're not the last to do it.
Yeah.
Did you get one of the monumental themed cakes for it to celebrate on set?
I think a cake is coming. We haven't done the table read for it yet. We do it on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I hope it's a good cake.
There better be a fucking cake, I swear to God.
I also really enjoy the fact that if you look back at season 1, it was kind of more insulated in the bubble of the school. And season by season, you can pull these characters out into different circumstances more. I remember the first time that we saw Melissa's house and the plastic wrap on her sofa. And now we get to see her having Barbara and Mr. Howard over to watch Avatar, and, her relationship with Jacob as roommates. So you get to learn so much more about the characters, but you're still very judicious about when, where, and why you do it. So how do you make sure that when you take them out of the school, that it's something that's either going to drive the plot forward or give us something really important about character?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that judiciousness comes from budgetary concerns primarily. I mean, the show was always kind of designed where in success we will expand the world, but then you're looking at it from a financial situation as well as showrunners, and you're like, okay, we have like this pot of money essentially, and we know that we have these really big ticket items. Like we might go to Philly and shoot at a baseball game. It's a very, very expensive endeavor. So how are we going to sort of balance the budget when we want to do something like that? And it's like, okay, well then we'll have our sort of bottle episodes within the school, or an episode that we can, the scene numbers are low enough that you can shoot it in 4 days instead of 5, which is our pattern. We typically take 5 days to shoot an episode, but if you shoot it in 4 days, you save quite a bit of money that you can apply towards other things. So oftentimes the budget does kind of drive that. But then, yeah, like with holiday episodes, and that. pertains to like our Mother's Day episode, right? With a big Gregory and Barbara story. And, that one felt like, well, you can't really tell that story about, you know, Gregory dealing with like the loss of his mother without, you have to tell that during Mother's Day. And we need, to both have, a big sort of, emotionally rich scene, in Barbara's house, or multiple scenes with her whole family and all of that. And then we also need to show Gregory like in his sort of like, you know, um, Fortress of Solitude, which is Top Golf, which is like also really expensive.
It's pricey to shoot Top Golf.
It is very pricey. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we try and sort of plan out as much as we can those kind of like big ticket items and like locations, early on in the process, so that our line producer Scott Seitz, who is wonderful, can help us figure out how to pull all that stuff off. And then we're also just like, we've tried to get smarter over the years of like, Melissa's house used to be an actual location. We've now since built it as a swing set on one of our stages at Warner Brothers. And when we do build those swing sets, we have to essentially make sure that we can reuse those as much as possible so that we're getting our money's worth. So it's a sort of big puzzle of both, sort of narrative creativity and then budgetary creativity that sort of feed into each other.
Because even mentioning the Philly baseball episode, there's something so specific about the way that came into play in terms of, okay, well, when does the baseball season line up with our production schedule, and actually realize rather than having it later in the season, it's going to have to come very early on. Otherwise, we can't shoot it. And then even the logistics of filming all of the dialogue with extras, but then filming the game and not knowing what's actually going to happen in the game. So I know that changed some of the story. And so all the intricacies that came into play with that episode, because it's so logistically based, as you just said.
Yeah. Well, and you're right, because like typically we save like some of those really, really big ticket items for the end of the season. And yeah, based on, the baseball schedule, it ended up being, I believe it was our fourth episode of season 5. And yeah, so then you're having to deal with the sort of fallout from spending all of that extra money up top, So yeah, I mean, you'll probably notice, in the middle of the season, like some of the episodes are smaller, and then we get to the mall, and that was a huge endeavor, doing 3 episodes in a row at this dead mall that they were literally like bulldozing, like while we were shooting. That mall no longer exists. They were literally like, we were having to like pay off the construction guys with donuts to get them to stop running the bulldozers for our sound. It was kind of crazy. It was like down to the wire.
You're literally like, there's children inside, you can't do it yet.
Thankfully, they weren't taking out anything load bearing, but they were clearing out a lot of debris.
I mean, the mall episodes are a perfect example of how you can take circumstances and look at all the different ways that characters attack it. And again, what you were describing at the beginning about the external circumstances being the biggest thing, because you take them to the mall, that's stressful for them all in different ways. Melissa's having a great time. Well, maybe Jacob's trying to figure it out. Gregory's stressed because it's outside of the structure that he loves to have in his day to day. And so when you looked at the mall episodes, how did you find what you felt the different stress points for them all would be?
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing we would talk about. We were like, how are all these people going to react to these things differently? Like, and then we started digging into it a little deeper, saying like, well, what specifically about a mall would be character illuminating? Like, you'll notice, like, we did a little runner with Melissa where she's sort of like brought back to her days as like a teenager in the mall, and over the course of the 3 episodes she started styling herself more and more like those days, and also just giving a chance for that arc was really good, because I think it was something that we had seen real schools go through, and it wasn't something we'd seen on TV before, and so anytime we get a chance to kind of like illustrate the current problems of public education and do it within the context of our characters and story where it makes sense, we usually try to take advantage of those sorts of situations.
Yeah. I love it too. And especially in terms of just thinking about what you were describing before, where you have these different groupings, you have all these different friendship groups that exist. So sometimes it's the more senior staff versus the newer staff. And sometimes it's, Melissa and Jacob confabbing on something because of their roommate situation. So whenever you're looking at circumstances, how do you find the different groupings of, okay, if we're in the break room, who's going to be in the break room? Or they're with the kids and they're trying to problem solve something in the gym, who's going to be in the room? And how is that going to shape the way that we go about this storyline?
Well, I mean, with the break room, anytime that we can have every single one of our series regulars in that room, it's the best because you can just have these amazing like scenes chock full of jokes and character moments where they're just pinging off of each other. That's like my favorite stuff in the show is like oftentimes like our cold opens or like the first scene after the cold open when they're starting the day and you're starting definitely your A stories, sometimes both A and B stories, all in one scene, and every single character is in there. Yeah, that's just the best, and we try and put those in there as much as possible because they're just really really fun to do.
It's so great to have these ensemble scenes with Mr. Johnson because he always throws out this lore and you kind of never know where the truth really sits with him. It's like maybe all of these things could be true. He is that type of person and maybe he's just loves saying these things out loud. What's the fun in the writers' room of everybody putting together all these different ideas of how they want to add to all of his lore and history?
We everybody wants to add to it. We have to be usually like at some point it gets too crazy, and then we have to like scale it back from wherever it was at. I keep waiting for someone to put together a document of all of the jobs that he's had and all of the that he said he's had and all of the places he said he's been, um, and all of the different religions he says he's taken part in. I think that character. I mean, it happened from the very start. I think it was Quinto who was talking to us about just like there's always a janitor in Philly who like had a life and you didn't know what it was. And I think that we've obviously taken that as a writer's room and very much run with it. But also just a credit to William Stanford Davis, the performer, is that he plays everything with sort of like an earnestness to it, but also like a wink. And so you can't tell actually what is real and what is not. And it's a credit to him as a performer, I think, that we have enjoyed saying he was a state senator, saying he was a CIA operative, saying he was an Olympic
Mhm.
was it pole vaulting? I can't remember what it was.
I believe it's
Coach.
Winter Olympics.
Winter
sport,
Olympics, yeah, Winter
But
Olympic sports.
yeah, Stan's awesome, and he wasn't a series regular in the beginning. He was in the pilot, for like a couple of scenes as a guest star, and even just the joke. There's a cutaway in the pilot to him filling in for one of the teachers, and he's just pointing to the board and it says that he's written the Illuminati and he says that's who runs the world, kids. And that was like just like an alt. Like we shot a bunch of different versions of like that cutaway, and that's the one that we stuck with, and that kind of I think kicked off the sort of like conspiratorial element of that character, and then we just sort of ran from there.
One of the characters that must be so fun for everybody in the writers' room as well is Ava because she projects all this confidence, and you know that there's insecurities and lack of confidence, but she doesn't like people to see it. But you kind of find these little ways for it to crack and peek through at different points. And I think, especially starting to give a little bit more of her backstory for the audience to understand, seeing the way that she responded to being fired and having to make that choice of, I really want to be here, solidified what you'd already interlaced into her for several seasons, which is she does actually care. She just won't admit out loud that she does. And so, how does that create a really interesting character to explore and dive into?
Yeah, I mean, so much of that too, like the writing paired with Janelle James's performance. Like, I think a lot of people sort of mistakenly think that Janelle is like Ava when I think they're kind of exact opposites. Janelle's putting on an incredible performance to play Ava and bring vulnerabilities and bring sort of that swagger that under the surface isn't quite what it seems to be. And I think from our side of the writers, I think that's always really fun. Anytime someone has deep insecurities that they are so desperate for you not to see, that's a really deep well to go to as writers and storytellers, because you're getting to learn so much about them. You see how they want to be perceived, and that tells you so much about them. And then you start to learn drips and drabs of how they perceive themselves and what they actually are. And so I think it's been really gratifying to sort of see that character grow. Also, it wouldn't be possible without Janelle's performance.
Yeah, and I think like over the seasons too, like, she was always super funny. We always knew that. Like she would come in and just crush every single joke, home run hitter.
Yeah.
But, it was she hadn't acted that much, prior to the show. She was a writer on Black Monday, and, she had acted, I think, in a handful of episodes in that, performing a character that she had kind of she had written. I think she sort of created that character. I might be misrepresenting that, but she was in the writer's room and then performed on the show. And then she walked into the casting offices, and we were doing everything on Zoom because it was like right in the middle of the pandemic. But we saw her and her tape, and it was like, oh my God, this person is it. And then we were worried, like, oh, will we get any pushback from like the studio or the network, because like she's not like a name, and everybody agreed, no, like she's it, she's Ava. And then, and again, we knew she was super funny, but then like over, I guess it was like, the firing episode was like a real sort of like watershed moment. But like even before that, like her like dramatic chops like started like increasing like exponentially, and we're like, oh my God, we can kind of have her do anything on the show now, which was such a gift. So that was really cool to see her evolve as an actor too, not just a comedian or a comedic actor.
I love that. Also, talking about Greg and Janine and their breakup in this past season, I was really interested in how you found the arc of that, because the audience obviously had the will they, won't they, and then they get together, and you want to make sure that you're not breaking them apart just for the sake of it being something dramatic. And I loved that it was a really understandable obstacle, and it was still two people that really want to be together, but just have to try to figure out these fundamental things that are very important to a relationship. And you kind of let them stay apart a little bit, but not too long for the audience at the same time. And them coming back together has to feel very natural and make sense. So how did you make sure that you were kind of satisfying each of those steps in that journey?
Well, I think we had talked about the fact that it was a chance to learn about sort of the broken models that each of them had seen, right? And to learn more about like what their parents were like, what sort of relationships they were around. And it really felt like an opportunity to just learn more about these characters, because that's the fun thing about a TV show is like you can have two characters, the audience thinks they know everything about them. And then when you put them together, just as is in a real relationship, new things start to come out. And I think seeing them have to work through issues that weren't something that existed prior to being in a relationship was really fun. And Patrick actually directed one of those episodes that dealt with the relationship, actually the one where they get back together. And he did a really fantastic job, I think, of just making these moments where they are going to reconnect and work through the broken modeling that they've had. I think he really brought them to the screen in a way where it felt very realistic and very natural and also funny.
The actors helped too. I just was like, hey, I think we should stick the camera here. That was great. I was so happy myself as a fan of the show that they were getting back together in that episode. It was like I think we sort of did the will they won't they as long as we could possibly strain it before people started getting pissed off, and then we got them back together, or we kept them apart as long as we possibly could before too many people started getting pissed off. So and I think we can feel that as the writers now have our finger on the pulse of like the fandom of the show as well, just having been fans of the show ourselves all this time. So yeah, a lot of it is just gut feelings, honestly. That's what it comes down to.
But I love how thoughtful everything is behind the scenes of all of these characters' journeys, and it's why the show works so well. So congratulations on all the Emmy nominations, and thank you so much for talking about it.
Thank you
so much
so
for
much.
having us.